Open this show up to another very interesting conversation that has been taking place over the last few days. And in this conversation is the principal figure of Larsen Toubro's chairman, Subrahmanyan. He's turned a massive controversy with his comments suggesting that employees should work 90 hours a week and even on Sundays to remain competitive. A video of his remarks, reportedly from an internal interaction, surfaced on Reddit, drawing criticism from the platform. He said, and I quote, "I regret I'm not able to make you work on Sundays. I will be more than happy to make you work on Sundays." What do you do at home? How long will you stare at your wife's face? Chinese work 90 hours a week and Americans only 50 hours. If you want to be on top, you have to work 90 hours a week, unquote. The remarks have been criticized for their overt sexism, and for the overt advocacy of an exploitative and toxic work culture that loads the dice in favor of employees who want to squeeze the last drop of blood out of their employees. Listen in first to this comment.
I regret I'm not able to make you work on Sundays, to be honest. If I can make you work on Sundays, I'll be more happier, because I work on Sundays also. What do you do sitting at home? How long can you stare at your wives? How long can the wife stare at your husband? Come on, get to the office and start working.
Viewers, Mr. Subrahmanyan earns, from the little we know, more than 50 crores a year. 50 crores, let that sink in. Think about that. So he's speaking really from a position of privilege. I'm not saying he doesn't deserve to be in that position, but when you earn 50 crores a year, even if you were to work all Sundays for just 1 year of your life, that's enough. You made your packet, you can go into the sunset. But people who are hardly being paid, to expect them to set aside everything and to work for 90 hours a week, do the math on that, viewers. Leave no time for their loved ones, their own health, their own sanity. I think that reeks of the kind of exploitative capitalism that belonged in the 1800s, viewers, which created really the grounds for revolution. Aside from the objectionable sexist undertone of his remarks, the L&T chairperson isn't the first corporate mogul to advocate for a super long work week. Narayan Murthy, Infosys co-founder, advocates for a 70-hour work week. Elon Musk at Tesla SpaceX CEO recommend 80 to 100 hours work week. Daksh Gupta, AI startup Greptile CEO, advocates for 84-hour work week. Grant Cardone, entrepreneur, advocates for 95-hour work week. In many Western countries, work hours have been moderated to ensure better work-life balance. People focus more on productivity, not long hours of work. Let's open this up. Let's actually, without prejudicing this debate, let's just keep it open and let's talk to some of those stakeholders who have worked in both corporate circles, who have a view on what life should be beyond the office, and have also, of course, managed teams for the longest period of time. So I want to bring in first Gurcharan Das. Mr. Das, how do you see this remark? Put it into context for us. Do you first of all agree with it?
Well, I think Mr. Subrahmanyan is very, very wrong. But I think both sides, including the ones who are trolling, they haven't got to the root of the problem. I want to lift it out of the tutu meme that this would entail. There was a research done in Britain, a very large research done, which showed that 72% of English people hated their jobs. I mean, this was devastating because, we human beings, we spend 1/3 of our lives working. And what a tragic waste of human lives if you hate your work. So right. Mr. Subrahmanyan's job is not to tell people how many hours to work, but to make them enjoy, to love their work so that they can come. They want to come to work. And so that the work gives them meaning and purpose. Similarly, the trolls should also realize that it is not about how many hours Mr. Subramaniam is talking about working, but it's the duty of every working person to, to work at a job that gives him meaning, gives meaning to his life. It's the job of parents and teachers to nudge a child in the direction of work that he or she enjoys. The point is that work must become meaningful for human beings to be happy,
Okay.
both at work and at home.
Okay.
And you don't find meaning, you create it. This is the responsibility both of the employee and the employer.
Okay.
And saying you're doing it to make your nation great, as Mr. Subramaniam did, that won't cut it.
That won't cut it. That's not actually, viewers, the responsibility of an employee, of an employer either, especially in the private sector. That can be something that maybe the government wants to take upon itself. But not that I'm trying to suggest that people shouldn't be in it to lead their country, break new ground, be at the front of or front end of innovation, etc. That also pushes nations forward and makes nations great. I'm not trying to in any way detract from that ambition. But let me bring in Dilip Cherian here, as well as Priya Chetty, Raj Gopal. I'd like to open this conversation out a little bit more. So, and Mr. Kakkar also joins this broadcast. Thank you very much, all of you. Mr. Cherian, where do you come in on this debate?
I think that what Mr. Subrahmanyam said needs to be taken seriously. Our competition is not about Generation Subrahmanyam, Generation Z, millennials, none of that. Our competition is with the rest of the world. Europe, which is cutting back to 4 days a week, is also simultaneously in collapse. China, which is perhaps the example that Subrahmanyam has quoted from a policymaker who he met, is actually encouraging its workers to work these hours. The second thing, we constantly talk of people, the privileged people in the organized sector. Some want to work from home, some want to work 10 hours, some want to work 40 hours. There is a whole army of gig workers, of people in the fields, people who are self-employed in the fields, who are working much longer hours a day. So we really are cutting them out of the question when we talk about saying, oh, Gen Z is against it, or the millennials are protesting about it. They will protest. They must protest. It is their choices, because in some senses, we are talking to a privileged generation which is standing on the shoulders of those who went before. Fair enough. Maybe Subrahmanyam, Narayan Murthy, and even Musk belong to a previous generation. But one thing I can assure you, that these are people who have not only created the present, but can see the future. And I think, therefore, it's worth understanding why they are making this sound at this point in time.
Okay. Priya Chetty, Rajagopal, apart from, of course, the offensive sexism involved with Mr. Subrahmanyam, I just want to ask you a simple question. Why are people forced in this country to work, even gig workers, 16 hours, sometimes 20 hours, and in some cases, and I've been with some people who are employed with various chauffeuring companies, for example, who work 24-hour shifts. Can you believe that? And then they get the next day off and so forth. 24-hour shifts. Now, they probably have to do it because A, there are a lot of people already waiting to take that job, and B, because they're paid a pittance. And they have to work sometimes all these number of hours so that they can actually afford 2 square meals a day. Forget about 3.
That, I think, is addressing a larger question, which covers economic advancement, social security, the fact that we don't have any. So there will be, while the focus on gig is very high, especially post-COVID, there are downsides to the gig economy as well. So we don't have enough coverage for gig workers, and I think that whether it's insurance, whether it's monitoring hours, I don't think we have it. So that's a reality that we need to address. But the question really had come up in the context of a much more organized workforce, which is what Mr. Subrahmanyan was addressing. And there is that possibility that while it was an internal meeting where perhaps things which were said off the cuff or in a sort of a semi-joke were uttered, the underlying elements of very high expectation, of dismissiveness of the individual, and the fact that work-life balance or even a family is kind of a joke, I think that has been a bit of a thorn on the side. And for a senior leader like the L&T chairman to come across with something like that, I'm not going to join in the trolling. I'm just saying that is a concern, because these messaging, which is happening now not in mono or stereo, it's in quadraphonic effect. Everyone seems to have an opinion on this. And it's a concern because what we don't see is now at interviews, people are actually asking questions like, I presume that you're looking at the, getting the job done rather than timing, etc. So which means that they're subtly sort of saying that that is the standard, that, number of hours are important in the way you're judged here. So this is going to start seeing some ripple down effects, which I don't think are going to be very nice. The check back, which I like, is senior leaders and senior, I think, people in the whether it's also celebrities, but industry leaders have also stepped up and sort of called this out. And that's something we need to look at. I respect what Dilip has also said, that, we have grown India on the shoulders of giants. We've all come from workaholic backgrounds. I know I've done some crazy hours myself, and I still continue to do so. But that's my choice, not because, Rahul has told me that that's what you're going to be doing. So that's something which we really need to understand. There will always be people who will do this. But if you're going to mount them as the icons to follow, then you're going to set up a very toxic culture in your workplace. If you're saying that family time is kind of, you're being a wimp, effectively that's what really is being said.
Yeah.
I think that is the bad thing. Nobody disrespects long hours. Nobody disrespects the fact that sometimes you've got to put in more to get the job done. Rahul, at the end of it, if I am not contributing to my company, I also suffer the backlash of having a company not do well. I get lower bonuses. I get, possibility of being, being phased
Retrenched.
out.
Yeah.
We are all interested in making a company successful and surviving, provided the leadership encourages people to be part of the mainstream and is looking at collective goals and transparency. So I know where my company is going because of my effort. So I will put in more time. I will put in more mental energy. But just using time as a metric, I think is a little, by any standards today, a little passé. You will say that, hard work never killed anyone. I think enough of our generation, my father must have told me this, or, his father must have told him this. But the fact is, we are seeing hard work killing a few people. And they are not wimps. Sometimes it's just too much to handle. And I think life is more important than, this.
Yeah, and we all learned the importance of living and life just 2 years back, when we were all sort of locked up at home. And
Absolutely.
we didn't know if the next person who sneezed would, basically pass on something that we won't, see through. But let me bring in Mr. Kakkar. Mr. Kakkar, there's one disturbing aspect of all of this. We're being crowded in by AI, so disruptive technologies, automatons that sort of want to replace the flesh worker, really, the person in flesh and body from the corporate floor, from the factory floor. Now we want to rip the soul out of the individual. This is disturbing.
It's very disturbing, because I'll tell you why. Management has completely missed the point that how do you manage a workforce which is sometimes better informed than you are. Because anybody above 45 has to learn technology. Anybody below 30 today was born with it. And therefore, they are working for people who are 45 and senior managers who want to manage. You cannot manage people today in an environment which is becoming more and more toxic and more threatening. The fact is that they have to be incentivized. How do you incentivize the worker to work his life out for you? What are you doing for him? What's in it for him? At the end of the day, it's okay for the manager or the owner of the business to want to squeeze the life out of the worker. But what's in it for the worker? Is there any incentive? Is there any ownership? Is there any motive to actually want to work his life out and give up all his other little things that he wants to do with his spare time? It's not. We do not have our workers' backs. If you first have your workers' backs and they know that through thick or thin, COVID or plague or the end of the world, the company is going to stand with you and not give you a pink slip, then they'll give you their best. But if you don't give them that assurance that the company has their back, then why should they? Because then they're attending office for 15 hours a day, but they're not working for 15 hours a day. For Christ's sake, they're going to find ways and means on how to squiggle out of it. HRD is going to be the worst job in the world because you're going to try and get the worker to work unwillingly. How can you do that? It's not a slave ship. You can't whip them into this thing. Look at Google. Look at the way they incentivize their workforce. They open the office 24/7. They said it doesn't matter when you come in, how you come in, what you dress, what you do. Just get the job done. And you'll get credit for it, and you'll also get money for it.
So
What
Dilip
have we do that?
the three other speakers, Dilip Cherian, so since you sort of have, I won't say, completely struck a discordant chord here, all I'm asking you is this: are we expecting too much of our workers without giving enough to them to make this a rewarding process?
Singapore Airlines recently gave a bonus of 8 months' salary to its entire workforce because they turned out a few $1 billion in profits. And I think that's a great example. But I think that they also severely curtailed the number of people they employed. And I'm not qualified to guess whether their working hours went up or not. I'm guessing it did. All I'm saying at this point of time is that I believe that this is in some senses an intergenerational argument. There is a reason why it has come up now. There is a reason why leaders are perhaps, and it's not coordinated, but there's a reason why several people are voicing the same aspiration for the next generation. Perhaps they are spotting that there are gaps here, and maybe they don't want to
I
make
kind
it
of don't buy that. I kind of don't buy that because,
Okay.
I mean, look, maybe India is an outlier, but bosses are also getting younger. So it's not as if, there is this massive gap. You have many startups, etc. Gurcharan Das, I think that, I don't think we can give that sort of benefit of doubt. Oh, this is a generational issue.
No, I think to some extent Dilip is right. It is become a generational issue, but happily so. It shows that finally, from my generation, where we didn't have any choice, now young people do have choices. And what my worry is that this kind of even thinking of Mr. Subrahmanyan and Mr. Narayan Murthy, both people one respects, would actually would result in what has happened in Europe. France, I remember when France legislated a 35-hour week.
Yeah.
It turned out to be an absolute disaster. That it, first of all, killed the work ethic, but also the impression it left with the ordinary French people was that, you don't work for the sake of your work. You work for the sake of your vacances, your holidays. You work for the sake of money. And they are the next person who wanted to change this 35-hour week. He said, look, you pay the worker 3 times per hour for every hour that he works after 35 hours. So it was a punishing way to. My point is that we don't want the government to get involved.
Right.
Because that's the fear. All these countries,
Yes.
Europe's position is partly
Because of overregulation.
Of a destroyed work ethic.
Right. Okay. Well,
My point is,
it's very funny because it's very funny you should say that, because these were the original Protestant countries where, work was worship. And we've sort of moved away from that. Anyhow, viewers, it's been fascinating. I've run out of time. I wish I could have spent the evening talking about this, because this is a story that touches pretty much everyone's lives. I leave it at this, viewers. Thank you for watching. Palki Sharma coming up with the Vantage next. Don't go away.